AV Shop Talk, Episode 25.
Podcasting from Boston, Massachusetts and Denver, Colorado, this is AV Shop Talk, covering the latest trends and emerging technologies and systems integration. This is where the AV pros come to talk shop. With your hosts, Nate Schneider and Jason Griffin.
What do The Muppet Show, sound dubbing to quarter-inch tape, and 1978 all have in common? Well, that's where Nevil Bounds got his start in the AV industry. Today, we'll be shining the career spotlight on Nevil Bounds, and back by popular demand, another round of AV Shop Talk from the pub, Nevil's Natural Environment. So we got some good feedback. People liked the episode last month from the pub there in Old Heathfield as I was visiting family in the UK. Just happened to be able to meet up with Nevil. So this is actually another recording that we made during that same session there. So the pub dog seemed to enjoy it, so I hope you will too. But also wanted to mention a quick follow-up to episode 23. When I did my CTS-D prep, I was kind of sharing with you guys everything I was doing to get ready for that exam. Once you submit your application and get that exam on the books in the calendar, it's that's when I really felt the pressure to get the studying into high gear. So I have to say I passed. The studying paid off, and I am a CTS-D holder. So I've been really trying to get that for a few years now, and finally had the opportunity. So I'd just like to thank everyone who supported me, mentors, designers who kind of fed into me and taught me throughout my well, let's see, almost 10 years now in the industry. So really thank you to all the people who showed me the ropes and gave me the experience I needed to go out and get that. And also special thanks to ImageStream Medical. So that's where I'm employed right now, and those guys hooked me up. So really appreciate them supporting me and getting the CTS-D. So anyway, check out episode 23 there if you're interested in learning how I set up a action plan of study to make sure I was prepared. Let's see. In other news, AV Shop Talk turns 2 years old. So this is definitely a special episode for me. In 2014, Jason and I launched the very first episode of AV Shop Talk, and we didn't really know kind of what we were getting into. We'd never done podcasting before, so it was all a big experiment for us. But I've really enjoyed it. You know, I'm planning to stick with it. Now Jason couldn't be with us again. He's still off for the holidays and what have you, and settling in to his new home in Colorado, and his new role. He's taking on a new job. And having a young family. So he's got a lot going on. He's super involved in the residential world, also doing a home tech podcast. You can check that out at hometech.fm if you want to hear what Jason's been up to. But he's had a little break from AV Shop Talk, but I think we're going to have him back next month. So stay tuned for that. We'll hopefully hear from Jason by then. And also like to extend a warm welcome if you're joining us for the first time. We would love to have you subscribe. We've got 25 audio episodes in the RSS feed. We've got 6 live streamed video episodes up on the YouTube channel. And we do a monthly email with links to the latest episode of AV Shop Talk. So, thanks for joining us in this round. This is a podcast by integrators for integrators. But without any further ado, let's head back to the pub in Old Heathfield.
AV Shop Talk.
Nevil, thank you so much for joining me here at the Star Inn in Old Heathfield. Certainly a very historic pub we're sitting at right now. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about your story and how you got into the AV industry.
You're very welcome, Nathan. Yes, it's very rural, isn't it, here? Yes, it's a nice part of the world. And yes. It's the pub dog as well.
Yes, hopefully this adds to the ambience of this recording here. This is going to be a little different for an AV Shop Talk. We're doing a face-to-face here. Just happened to have heard from Nevil this week and he's located in the UK, and I happen to be here visiting family, so it just worked out that we were able to meet up. So, yeah, looking forward to shining the AV career spotlight on you and hearing your story. So, before we get too far into it, currently you're the key account director at Feltec, and you're based out. Is it in London, or is it just outside of the city?
It's just to the north of London, in a city called St Albans in Hertfordshire. It's about 15-20 miles north of London.
Okay. So pretty close to London. I noticed you're a holder of the Crestron DMC-D certification, so you do a lot of digital media, which in the US is also kind of the go-to thing. It's very popular for HDMI transport. We use it in almost every conferencing system we install when we do a conferencing system, so a lot of experience there. So interesting. There, UK and the States share a lot of things in common, but also there's a lot of differences too, because they are two very different cultures, but came kind of from the same culture way back when. So that'll be interesting too, to kind of, pick up on those differences, down to the power and the types of connectors. But before we get into all that, I want to know more about what is your day-to-day like at Feltec. What, just for people that maybe are not familiar with what a key account director does on a typical day. What, can you fill that out for us?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the work that we do now is very extensive, mainly in the financial services sector, in the London area, but also elsewhere in the country, a little bit overseas as well. Banking, conference rooms, meeting rooms.
Okay.
We also do a lot of training systems for the fire, police and ambulance service as well. But my job really is to look after our largest accounts that we have at Feltec, which is always a very busy thing. And even this time of year, as we're coming up towards Christmas at the end of 2015, even though it's the last day of working today for us, it's still busy on the phone and email. So it's really all about looking after the client's requirements, and also the technical interpretation of what they want to do. And it's my job, along with our design team back at the office, to make sure that they can realise the interpretation of what they want to do.
Yeah, and that's quite the challenge too, because you might have a client that thinks they want something, and they're not aware of something else that might be a better fit, and making sure they get what really meets their needs versus something they may have heard about that's the new shiny thing.
Yeah, sure.
So that is definitely a challenge. Now, how about, you mentioned the last working day. Is the fiscal year typically end on the actual year, or do you find that there are people scrambling in December to just spend the last dollars in their budget?
We have two different ends of the financial year, often in the UK. A lot of them, as you say, it's the fiscal year. It's the end of December usually, and there is some end of budget spend. We've also got what we call the end of the tax year, which tends to be April the 4th. So the run up towards March, for example, particularly in government sectors, which we're very active in as well, that's a very busy time. So they find out within about a month of the end of the financial year they've got some money to spend, which is great. But of course they've got to spend it within that 4-week period, and so that's pretty challenging.
Must be some long nights during that stretch.
Definitely, but that's always the case. At the end of our financial year, often, I think at the moment it's the end of October, so that is different to everybody else's as well, and often it's to do with when the company was started as well. So, it's end of year for all of us is a very busy time to make sure we hit target, of course.
Okay, so that's what you're doing now at Feltec. You've got quite a bit of experience under your belt, so I'm eager to learn from what I can from you and how you came up in the industry in the UK specifically. I know that as I mentioned earlier, there are differences in how people get into it, and I think one unifying thing we discussed before we started recording is the idea of just kind of falling into something, and I know that happens in the US a lot too. Can we rewind way back when you first got your first job in the audio video realm, and kind of what that job was and how you got it?
Sure. I mean, it actually started a little bit before that, really, when I was working for the local amateur dramatic society near where I lived, and then also to do with school. I was in the sound crew at school for the theatre and the lighting crew, so that was a good starting point, really. When I left school at 16, it was 1978. And I really left without any qualifications at all, apart from a music qualification and an English language qualification, which are probably the two things I enjoyed.
So you studied music theory a little bit?
Yes, I did, yeah. My first ever job was working for a company called ATV Studios. They were based in a town called Boreham Wood, near Elstree Studios today, just to the north of London. And my first job was as a tape operator on the Muppet Show.
No kidding.
This was the show that never got made in the US, but got made here because I think the television company and the producers wanted to make it here if they could. And so I was operating quarter-inch tape machines and 2-inch multi-track machines back in those days. This is because it's the sort of thing I wanted to do. I wanted to be in the broadcast environment. It only lasted a year for me because, sadly, they actually stopped the bus service from where I lived to where the studios were. This is before I could drive as well at 17. So I actually left because I could no longer get to work anymore, which was a real shame.
Bummer.
That's the kind of thing you don't expect to have to deal with. But so that was it was a great insight into how television is made. Of course, back in those days in this country, it was a very unionised industry. So I was in charge of tape ops for a little while there, but I really wanted to get into graphics and videotape, but I wasn't allowed to talk to these guys because they're on a different pay grade from me.
Yeah, different pecking order.
Yeah,
you had to earn your keep and make your way up bit by bit. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
No kidding. So now this is interesting. When I studied I studied sound recording technology at school, and one of the first things we had to do before we could get in behind Pro Tools was work on quarter-inch tape, just so we could get that culture of where the technology came from. And I remember my teacher holding up a piece of tape and being like, "This is a piece of time you're holding in your hand," and just kind of really ingraining that into us. It's a totally different world. You've got razor blades, you've got grease pens, you've got really different skills that are sadly going to be lost. But it is good to include that in the conversation, I think, today, so that future generations listening can kind of remember where the industry came from. I
think it's good to have that. And I've gone a bit retro back in my studio back at home. I've got a 1/2-inch.
I saw the picture you posted on Twitter.
A Tascam 38 there, and it sounds beautiful. It's a labour of love. It takes a lot of looking after, but it sounds fantastic. And to my ears, it's actually a better sound. The analog sound is a warmer, more mellow sound than digital. But it's not for everybody. It takes a lot to keep the machine going, but on a good day, it sounds very sweet indeed.
Yeah, you've got all kinds of different. I can't even remember the terms. Yaw and the way the tapes can become
and bias and tape saturation. And of course, in those days, you could overload the tape deliberately to give it a certain sound, which you just can't do in the digital.
Yeah,
of course.
Yeah, that's right. So you got your first taste at ATV Studios in 1978, there for a year, and then how did you find your way into the next position?
Yeah, there was a very local company to me called Hammond's AV, a company that dealt a lot with the larger defence companies. And again, this is still in the times of the Cold War, so we're sending a lot of 3/4-inch pneumatic video systems overseas, used for military and all sorts of things. And I had a very good 6 years there, actually, looking after some of the bigger corporate companies. We had our own post-production suite there, so I was involved in some of the videotape editing for a while. But it gave my first taste of the sales environment, I would say. And that was a very interesting time, because coming from a technical background, coming into sales, it gave me an additional appreciation of what was possible, really. And it was I think every job I've ever done, I've learned something from it. And the takeaway I had from working at Hammond's was to be working as part of a team, but to learn as much as you could about different aspects of technology. And of course, I'm still talking about in those days, it was 7980, 16mm film projection as well. So there's a lot of mechanical stuff to think about then, which we don't even talk about. Clearly.
And I have to ask the question, just because the name is Hammond, there's no relation to the organ manufacturer, is there?
Very slightly, there was really? Actually. They had a music division as well, which did sell Hammond organs, funnily enough. But actually, the owners of the company were called Hammond, And in fact, sadly, the company no longer exists. It went a few years ago now, but a lot of people in the industry actually worked for that company over many years, and it was a great company to work for, and everybody learned a lot from it.
Yeah. Great. Well, thanks for letting us know about that. I had to ask about that. There's so much cross, pollination, if you will, between the music and broadcast and integration, and everybody kind of knows everybody, and shares similar interests and skills. So then from there, so you spent about 6 years there, got your first taste of sales, and then the next thing, I think you became a managing director. I think that's...
Yeah, I started off just in the sales role, but my colleagues at Dataton in Sweden, at that time, 91, 92, they were making tape slide systems. This was very large systems which dealt with large conferences environment, museums, visitor centres. And I started off just looking after the UK work, and then subsequently got into an international role as well. But just before that, actually, in 1985, I spent my first 6 years at Electrosonic as well. So I got some experience there in the sales field, again with an international role ultimately as well. But a lot of it, both of these jobs were in the audiovisual and tape slide sector as well, which again, fantastic environment because it gave you access to the creative guys and girls, producers, sound recordists, photographers. It was a really good experience of the whole industry.
Yeah, so it sounds like the sales thing, you're really starting to solidify your career path now.
Yeah, exactly. But of course, that tape slide business, although it had been lasting for a very long time, came to an end really towards the end of the 1990s, I would say. And certainly when I was working for Dataton, it was just as they were starting to bring the Watch Out product in, late 99, early 2000, which really transformed the way that large screen video and graphics are displayed. And they were one of the first companies, in fact, to come up with really high quality solutions that were based on the normal way of working with graphics and video, the timeline environment and this kind of thing. And they've gone on, 15, 16 years later to become a really successful at this. And I'm still in contact with the guys today, actually, and we still use some Dataton products for some of the projects that we do.
Okay, so that's not a name that I'm familiar with, and I know as a podcast host, it's easy to try to pretend like you know everything, but a lot of these names are not familiar to me, being in the US.
Dataton did very well in the US, in fact, and mainly out of Cincinnati. And I don't mind name checking the guy called Jim Kellner, that worked for AVL for many years, and Jim ran the Dataton operation in the US for a very long time. And again, he was almost single-handedly from East Coast to West Coast, all over the US. Did a very nice job of promoting the product and technically supporting it as well. Very knowledgeable guy, Jim. So Jim really helped to get Dataton established in the US.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Great. Good to know. So, and then we've established that sales is kind of the thing that you got exposed to. You still got the background of doing the tape dubbing, and you've been immersed in the AV world for a while. And the next position you landed was as a a senior systems consultant. So can you tell us about how you got into that role?
Yeah, that was quite interesting. Electrosonic very kindly asked me back for another 6 years. So perhaps I did something right the first time round, but that was actually a 12-year gap in between those two bits of employment, and really looking after the corporate sector again, discussing system design with people, getting really involved with some of the technical parts of it, but still in the sales angle as well, I would say. And this was at a time, it was in 2002, so the corporate sector was doing pretty well, but it just came to an end in 2008 when we had the big banking crisis, the big financial slowdown, I think, across the world really, and London and the city corporates really got hit very badly with that. So that resulted in a lot of people just turning the tap off in terms of budgetary spend. It was a big deal then. So and our company at the time, Electrosonic, where I was quite heavily reliant on that sector in the division I was working for. It also had another big sector in museums, visitor centres, theme parks, where it's still extremely successful today. But at that time, we weren't sure really whether the corporate sector was going to survive. It did, as it turned out, but only after a lot of internal restructuring, I think.
Yeah. So as when I hear the word consultant, it comes more of the design aspect of it. Is that what you were doing in this role?
A little bit, yeah. But really, it was more a consultative role from a sales angle.
Okay.
So
sales engineering.
We'd come back with a brief. We'd talk about it with the internal design teams. But probably different terms that you would use in the US, I think.
Yeah. I'm still trying to wrap my head around those subtle differences.
Yeah.
So it's good to ask those types of questions. Okay. So great. So now you're to the point where you, I think, I'm not sure what year this would have been, but you ended up at Quadrant Visual Solutions.
Yeah, I did a year there working for them in London, but this was just at the time when business was really difficult in London, and sadly Quadrant is no longer around, but at the time we started doing pretty well, but again it was suffering badly from the fact that all of our business was in the corporate sector. And the division that I was working for was in London, and it was the city corporates that got hit worst with the budgetary cutbacks, and so sadly we couldn't make that work in the end, which was a pity. It was a nice bunch of guys and girls to work with, but at the end the financial side of it just didn't work out, I'm afraid.
Yeah. Now the next thing that you were involved with was business development, and I know Jason, when he listens back to this, he obviously it isn't with us today, but I'm sure he'll be listening back to this at some point. His role is now as business development. Can you tell us about what that was like and how it was maybe different from what you've done in the past, or was it very similar? Or?
There are some similarities, but really business development is about promoting ideas and again turning people's wishes into reality, but just getting the momentum really of how we go about our business. And I did this role at Holoviz, and that was a very interesting company. They've now gone on to much bigger and better things since I left, but at the time it was very much 3D and visualization systems, stereoscopic displays. Today their business is very much in the theme park and software writing environment. Gave me the year that I was there, gave me a lot of exposure to some of the automotive companies, some of the bigger engineering companies. It was a fascinating time, and again I really enjoyed working with the guys there and getting a lot of experience.
Great, yeah. So it sounds like museums are very popular. It sounds like the theme parks in the UK. I'm trying to wrap my head around kind of like the core business that you have the most experience in. How would you describe that?
I think probably my greatest level of experience is in the corporate sector, but I do keep a keen interest in the theme park and museums and visitor centre areas. I mean, the business that we have here in the UK for that is nowhere near the size that you have in the US, of course. But I think because tourism is very important in this country, there's a big trend towards improving museums, visitor centres, theme parks, this kind of thing. So although the budgets are nowhere near the things that you find in the US or in the Middle East, for example, we are seeing a big upturn in this area of business, I would say.
Well, I tell you, my wife really wanted to go to Highclere Castle to see where Downton Abbey was filmed. That was what I heard. But it's closed for the seasons, unfortunately. But I don't know if they would have a lot of need for audiovisual, since they're trying to preserve the times of the past. Right?
Exactly.
But I had to bring that one up because that was one of the popular attractions that my family was interested in seeing.
Sure, yeah.
And Stonehenge wouldn't really be too popular with the 1-year-old and 3-year-old at this point, but maybe in the future.
I think so, yeah, absolutely.
Great. So now, moving right along, then you landed your first job at Feltec, which is where you're currently at now.
Yeah, in 2010 they asked me to become sales manager of Feltec, and Feltec's always been a very interesting company to me, and I followed them very closely even when I wasn't working there. I had a lot of friends that did work there. Feltec started in 1989, and really it came out of when Peter Fell, who is still our current managing director, left Independent Television News in London, a very big news agency that supplied a lot of in fact all of the regional ITV companies with the news service. And in those days he was a senior engineer on the 1-inch tape machines, on videotape machines. But rather like many broadcasters back in the late 80s and early 90s, there was a lot of duplication of labour, and a lot of redundancies went on, and a lot of people were furloughed. I think there was just not enough work for everybody. So he actually started up Feltec at that point, and really Feltec at that time was doing some government work, conferences, live events, that kind of thing. And as the 90s came by, we started to do more in the corporate sector as well. And when I joined in 2010, we were very nicely established in that area. So when I joined, we were 13 people, and now we're over 50. So it's in that 4 or 5 year period.
Wow,
there's been a lot of growth. But my job at the time in 2010 was to help run the sales team, to make sure that the business was healthy in terms of the types of business that we got in. At that point as well, there was still a lot of government work going on. That we've done some very large government projects with the G20 summits, the G8 summits, that kind of thing. But there's not much of that business going on now at all. So we've really had to reshape the business to make sure that we've got as many different sectors as we can, whether it's maintenance, service, broadcast, AV, corporate, entertainment areas. As many different areas as we can to spread the risk. Frankly, I think trying to have all your eggs in one basket is never a good thing in our business, and you really want to try and spread it across as many different vertical sectors as you possibly can.
Yeah, that's quite a list of services. I was poking around on the website this week, and I'm thinking, okay, broadcast design, I'm seeing corporate systems integration, I'm seeing media services, and that there's a lot of versatility there. So, and you said it's grown to about 50 people now.
Yeah, we've got just over 50 people, and some of those people are actually based at clients' sites, so they're on our payroll, but based elsewhere. So they're helping running events and conferences elsewhere. We've got 5 or 6 of those at the moment, but the rest of the guys and girls are based normally at the office. But right across the board, from sales, technical, engineering, CAD, design, installation, programming. So we've got a lot of different skill sets within the company, and we've got multi-skilled people as well. A lot of people that can program in AMX or Crestron, but are very good system designers in their own right as well. So
yeah, it's definitely good to almost like picking an all-star team. You want to pick people with multiple skill sets, and really that's what makes you stand out, I think, too. For anyone listening that is looking to kind of get an edge on the job market, if you can learn a couple really important skill sets, that's going to make you stand out versus just having kind of one discipline that you focus on, which is challenging. But
it is, and I think that the way I've been fortunate in my career is that I've had exposure to the technical side as well as the sales side, and that's given me an appreciation of both ends of the spectrum, if you like. So that's important. I think my advice to anyone trying to come into our industry would be that, to have as many different skill sets as you can, and network as much as you can as well. That's a really important part of it.
Yeah, great. 100% agree with the networking thing. It's always good to meet people, just like we're doing right now. I'm glad to have this opportunity. All right, so now you're with Feltec. That's what you're up to today. But I did want to mention, you just from looking at your LinkedIn page, you did spend a brief amount of time at a company called Torpedo Factory Group. Was this an armament company, or?
Well, not quite, but they were based in a building which were involved with that back in the Second World War.
Okay, so that's how the name.
They're a very interesting group, actually. A company that have bought many smaller audiovisual companies in the past, both conferences, events, and sales-based companies. And I spent a very interesting 7 or 8 months there, actually. Very nice guys and girls there too. But then just coming round to just over a year ago now, Feltec very kindly asked me to come back, which I've now done, and I've come back in a board role. In fact, I left as a board member as well as sales director back in 2014 in February. But now I've also come back as a board director with 5 of the other guys, looking after again our largest accounts, as I mentioned earlier, just to make sure we've got traction and momentum and building the business. for the future as well.
Great. Well, let's, as we wrap our conversation up here that focused on your career path and how you kind of made your way through the industry, what's one piece of advice you might give to somebody who hears this and says, you know what, I would like to be in sales, I'd like to be a key account director looking over kind of the bigger clients of a particular company. Maybe what's one key piece of advice you would give to somebody who's new or just starting out that might want to be where you're at some point?
I think really, Nate, it's about networking, as I mentioned earlier. I think whether it's other integrators, whether it's vendors, manufacturers, distributors, there's plenty of opportunity for this at the Infocom shows, the ISE shows, the Infocom networking events. All this kind of stuff is really, really valuable. And if you're starting from scratch, it's not a bad starting point, really. And to give yourself enough understanding of how the business works, how the people work. And most people actually stay within the business over many, many years. Very few people, actually, I've noticed, leave the business entirely and go and sell cars or work in construction. A lot of people stay in it. So there's a lot to it, but there's a lot of interesting people in the industry that are worth talking to. So networking in the social and business sense is really important, I think.
Great. Well, where can people find you if anybody wants to reach out to you or connect with you on social media, maybe? Where's a good place to...
Yeah, social media for me, it's Twitter. I use that quite a bit, and it's at Nevil Bounds. That's Nevilbounds, one word. Or you can find me on LinkedIn also, and also my email address. If anybody wants to write to me directly, I'm happy to take questions. It's nevil.bounds@feltec.co.uk.
Great. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to talk shop with us about your career, Nevil.
You're very welcome, Nate. Really enjoyed it.
Well, that will do it for this episode of AV Shop Talk. I hope you enjoyed hearing a little bit of Nevil's story and how he got his start in the AV industry and kind of made his way up until now and where he is today with Feltec. I just wanted to thank you for listening, and if you did enjoy what you heard, if you liked it, we would really appreciate your support. And the best way you can do that is simply word of mouth. Just telling a friend in the AV industry that considers himself an AV pro or maybe a systems integrator or even just an AV enthusiast, somebody who's a pro AV enthusiast who might find this show interesting. We would definitely appreciate it if you took the time to spread the word. And thanks for connecting with us. We've got about 800 of you over there on Twitter, so really appreciate the follows, and hope to get back into the Follow Friday routine again. I haven't done that for a while, but definitely love to reach out to our followers over there and just say hey, and we appreciate you. So be looking for that in the future, and we will talk shop with you in the next episode of AV Shop Talk. AV Shop Talk podcast is produced independently by Jason Griffin and myself, Nate Schneider. Musical contributions have been provided by Colin Owens. Voiceover contributions have been provided by John Perry. If you'd like more information about the episode you just heard, please head over to avshoptalk.com/episode 25.